It started with a house. Just a crumbling, mildew-scented, crooked little house on the edge of town. No one wanted it. Neighbors swore it was cursed. The porch light flickered even when it wasn't wired. Doors slammed at night. The last two families who lived there. One disappeared without a trace. The other left so fast, they didn't even pack. And yet, she bought it. A single mom, broke, exhausted, and out of options. Her name was Claire. She had $47 in her bank account, 2 kids asleep in the backseat of a borrowed car, and absolutely nothing left to lose. So when she saw the hand-painted sign outside that leaning gate, as is, $900, cash only, she didn't flinch. She took it as a sign from the universe. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the moment she stepped through that front door, she set off a chain of events that would reach all the way to a mansion carved into the cliffs, where a billionaire named Dorian Holt was sipping aged wine and smiling like the world belonged to him. But just 7 days after Claire moved in, his empire crumbled. His secrets, ugly, buried, and blood-stained, rose up from the very ground she stood on. And the world watched as the king fell. So what happened in those 7 days? What did that broken little house reveal? And how did a woman with absolutely nothing walk away with everything? You're about to hear a story most people wouldn't believe, but every word you're about to hear is true. So turn your lights down low, settle in, and before we begin, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Globe. We read every one. Because this isn't just a story about a cursed house. It's a story about revenge, redemption, and a mother who unknowingly held the match that burned an empire to the ground. Claire had always believed in second chances. But lately, it felt like life was out of them. She was 32, a mother of 2, and broke in every sense of the word, financially, emotionally, spiritually. Her days were spent juggling part-time shifts at a diner that barely kept the lights on, while her nights were spent calculating which bill could wait another week. But the hardest part? Was watching her kids pretend they were okay. Lily, just 9, had stopped asking for new shoes. She told Claire it was fun to color over the holes with black markers so no one at school would notice. And Ben, sweet little Ben, 6 years old, had started hoarding half his school lunch, just in case mommy didn't have dinner again. Claire hated herself for it. Not because she wasn't trying, but because trying didn't seem to matter anymore. Her husband had vanished 2 years ago. One morning he went out for cigarettes and never came back. No note, no call, just gone. Left her with 2 kids, a pile of medical debt from her mother's cancer treatments, and a car that died more than it drove. She'd tried shelters, tried couch hopping with friends, tried everything short of selling her soul. And then, as if the universe was playing one last cruel joke, they were evicted. 3 days before Christmas. She still remembered the way the landlord looked at her as she begged for more time. Cold eyes, flat voice. It's not personal. But it was personal. Because when your babies are sleeping in the back of a car, everything becomes personal. Claire drove around that night with no destination. Just circling neighborhoods, praying for a miracle. The kids had fallen asleep, holding hands in the backseat under a blanket of fast food napkins. Then she saw it. That crooked little house, sagging porch, broken fence, shingles missing like a patchy haircut. A for sale sign half buried in weeds. And in sloppy red spray paint underneath it. Cursed. Enter at own risk. Most people would have driven right past it. Claire didn't. Something in her gut said stop. So she did. The house was selling for $900. Cash only. No agents. No inspections. No questions. Claire didn't have $900. She had $47 and a wedding ring she hadn't been able to part with until now. She sold it the next morning to a pawn shop 2 towns over. Got $960. Just enough. No one could understand why she bought it. Not even she could explain it. Maybe desperation talks louder than logic. Maybe she just needed something, anything, to call hers. That was Claire's world. Cold, unforgiving, and quiet. Too quiet. But across town, in a world so different it might as well have been a movie, someone else was living the life Claire had always dreamed of. Dorian Holt. To the outside world, he was brilliant. A genius entrepreneur. Built his first tech company at 19. Sold it at 24 for $500 million. Now, at 41, he ran one of the biggest AI firms in the country. His face was on magazine covers. His quotes were turned into motivational posters. Visionary, disruptor, game changer. But behind all the lights, behind the clean suits, private jets, and staged philanthropy, was a man who had mastered the art of lying. Not just to the public, but to himself. Dorian had secrets. He had enemies. And he had a past buried so deep, even he pretended it didn't exist. But he was about to learn something. The past doesn't stay buried forever. Especially not when it's hiding under the floorboards of a house you swore no one would ever live in again. The first night in the house was strange. Claire didn't expect comfort. She knew better than to hope for miracles. But she thought at least they'd have silence. A place to rest. A roof, however cracked, between her children and the night sky. Instead, the house groaned. Not just old house creaks. These were deep, chest-vibrating groans that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. Ben said it sounded like someone was crying inside the pipes. Lily swore she saw a shadow move in the attic. Except the attic had no stairs and was nailed shut. Claire chalked it up to exhaustion, stress, imagination. Until the morning she found the journal. It was hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the corner of the living room, under a dusty rug they dragged in from the car. Leather-bound, old, smelled like mold and ink and something else, something faintly metallic. Like rust, or blood. There was no name inside. No date, just page after page of rushed, desperate handwriting. And the first sentence sent a chill down her spine. If you're reading this, he thinks you're gone too. Claire didn't know what he meant, or who it referred to. But the more she read, the faster her heart pounded. The journal told the story of a woman, also a mother, who had lived in that same house years ago. She wrote about being watched, followed, controlled. She mentioned a man, wealthy, powerful, untouchable. She never named him. But she described the way he smiled in photos. How he gave to charities just to clean his conscience. How he built his fortune off the backs of others, and left ruin in his wake. The deeper Claire read, the more it all started to connect. The initials in the margins. The scribbled sketches of a logo. One that looked exactly like the one she saw on tech billboards around the city. Dorian Holt's company. The woman had been trying to expose something. Some kind of buried scandal, financial fraud, maybe more. And then suddenly, the entries stopped. Just like that. The last page was smeared, almost torn through by the force of the pen. A final warning, hastily scribbled. He knows. He found me. Don't trust the floorboards. Claire dropped the journal. Her hands were shaking. It was probably nothing, right? Just a scared woman's ramblings. A ghost story. But when she looked at the floor, at the dark stains under the wood, she realized something. They weren't just water stains. And that night, when she stepped outside for air, she saw it. A black SUV, parked across the street. Engine off, windows tinted. No one came out. No one ever did. It just sat there. Watching. That was the moment Claire knew. She hadn't bought a house. She bought a secret. And someone, somewhere, didn't want it found. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the old couch, the journal open beside her, her eyes flicking back and forth between the window and the street lamp outside. The SUV was gone now. But the imprint it left, on her mind, on her nerves, was still there. In the daylight, she tried to tell herself it was a coincidence. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone lost. But the feeling in her stomach said otherwise. And when she flipped to the back of the journal, something new caught her eye. Folded between the last two pages, nearly glued together with age, was a faded photograph. Black and white, grainy, but clear enough. It was the woman from the journal, and standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder like he owned her, was a much younger Dorian Holt. Same piercing eyes, same too perfect smile. Claire's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't fiction. This was real. She wanted to stop, to burn the journal and pretend none of it ever existed. But something kept her going. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that deep, quiet voice inside every mother that says, "Don't let this happen to your children." She started digging. Library archives, public records, news clippings, anything she could find. And little by little, the puzzle began to take shape. The woman's name was Eve Callahan, a former secretary for a tech startup that later became Dorian Holt's empire. She'd filed a whistleblower complaint in 2004. It vanished without a trace. No follow-up, no investigation. 2 weeks later, she took a personal leave. She was never seen again. Claire felt sick. All these years, the house hadn't been cursed. It had been silenced, used to bury a truth someone wanted erased. And now, she was living in it. That evening, while Lily and Ben were playing on the sagging porch, a package appeared on the steps. No label, no return address, just a plain manila envelope taped shut. Claire opened it inside, hands trembling. Inside were 3 things. A flash drive. A crumpled photograph of Eve again, but this time she looked bruised. And a note, typed in all caps. You have something that belongs to me. Stay silent, or your kids will pay for what she started. Claire dropped the envelope like it was on fire. Her instincts kicked in, lock the doors, close the curtains, hold her babies close. But her mind was spiraling. Who sent it? How did they know she had the journal? Was someone watching them? She didn't know what was on the flash drive. She didn't want to, but the thought of what could happen if she ignored it burned a hole in her chest. That night, after the kids were asleep, she plugged it into her ancient laptop. There were 2 files. One was a video. The other, an audio recording labeled meeting_0419. She clicked the video. Grainy surveillance footage filled the screen. Dorian Holt, sitting at a conference table, surrounded by men in suits. Talking numbers, laughing. Then, silence. Dorian leaned forward and said something that froze Claire's blood. If this leaks, we're done. But no one's going to listen to a receptionist with a drinking problem. If she talks, I'll make sure she disappears, like the others. The room didn't flinch. They nodded. Like it was normal. Like it was routine. Claire slammed the laptop shut. This wasn't just corporate corruption. This was calculated destruction, and it had been going on for years. She had evidence. Real evidence. Proof. But what could she do? Who would believe a broke, jobless single mom living in a condemned house? What power did she have against a billionaire with a lawyer for every letter in the alphabet? She thought about going to the police. But then she remembered the woman in the journal, and the note on her porch. She was being watched, and the moment she stepped out of line, her children wouldn't be safe. The walls of the house, once a fragile kind of comfort, now felt like a cage. Like the walls had eyes. Like every creak of the floorboards was someone drawing closer. But Claire had made a decision. She wasn't going to run. Not this time. She couldn't bring back Eve. She couldn't undo what was done. But she could expose him. She just needed to be smart, careful, patient. Because somewhere deep down, she realized something. Dorian Holt wasn't afraid of lawyers. He wasn't afraid of headlines. He was afraid of the truth in the wrong hands. And now, that truth lived under her roof. It all could have ended there. Claire could have packed up the kids and vanished. Tossed the flash drive in a storm drain. Walked away before the news tightened. But she didn't. Because something had shifted inside her. For the first time in years, Claire wasn't just surviving. She was fighting. She copied the video. Backed up the audio file to a hidden cloud drive. She tucked the journal behind the bathroom's cracked drywall. Every instinct screamed she was in over her head, but something stronger pushed back. Eve never got the chance to finish her story. But I can. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Dorian Holt was beginning to feel something he hadn't in years. Fear. He was in his penthouse office, high above the skyline, when his assistant entered, visibly shaken. She handed him a plain envelope. No postage, no markings, just one word written in Sharpie across the front. Truth. Inside, a still image pulled from the video Claire had watched. Dorian's face mid-sentence, frozen in time, mouth open, just beginning to say, if this leaks. His hands clenched. He hadn't heard those words in over a decade. The last time anyone brought up the Eve Callahan incident, it had cost him 7 figures to make it disappear. He had sworn no one would ever dig that deep again. The house was bought under a dummy name, sealed, forgotten. And now, it was making noise again? He barked at his team to trace the source. Cybersecurity, PR, even a private, consultant, who specialized in what Dorian liked to call non-digital containment. The problem was, Claire wasn't online. No digital footprint, no social media, no TikToks, not even a working phone half the time. She was invisible. But the secret she held? Loud enough to shake glass. Claire had no idea how fast things were moving behind the scenes. But she could feel it. In the way the neighbors looked at her. In the sudden repair crew that showed up claiming they were sent by city order. In the man at the gas station who asked about her kids when she'd never seen him before. And then, the break-in. She came home from a grocery run and found the front door hanging open. The journal was gone, laptop smashed. The photo of Eve? Ripped in half and left on her bed like a warning. But they didn't find the flash drive. She kept it with her now. Always. Sewn into the lining of Ben's old teddy bear. It was the one place no one would look, and the one thing she knew no one would take from her. Claire was done playing defense. She made a call. To someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Her cousin Jonah, a junior editor at a small investigative podcast. Not big, not flashy. But honest, and hungry for a real story. At first, he didn't believe her, thought she was chasing ghosts. Until she played the audio. Until she sent the footage. Silence on the line. Then he whispered, Jesus. Claire, do you know what you have? She did. She just didn't know how long she could hold on to it. That same night, Jonah agreed to drive out and meet her. 2 hours away. Bring everything, he said. If this is real, we're not just leaking it. We're burying him. Claire sat at the window waiting, heart in her throat, children asleep in their makeshift bedroom. It was raining again. Like the house remembered. Like it knew. And across town, in a glass tower Dorian once called invincible, a billionaire with everything was starting to realize he was standing on glass. He called in favors, threatened journalists, froze accounts, but nothing worked. Because the leak hadn't gone public. Not yet. It was still just a whisper. And that scared him more than a headline. Because a whisper means someone's close enough to know the truth. And for the first time in years, Dorian Holt couldn't silence it. Jonah was late. Claire stared at the clock for the 5th time in an hour, her palms damp, the teddy bear clutched to her chest like a lifeline. She'd packed everything, Ben's drawings, Lily's favorite doll, the last backup USB drive. But no headlights, no knock. No Jonah. And then her phone buzzed. A private number. She hesitated, then answered. Claire, the voice said calmly. Too calmly. I know what you're trying to do. It wasn't Dorian's voice, but the message was his. You think you're protecting your kids. You're not. You're gambling with them. Her throat tightened. You got one shot. Hand it over. Or we take it back, piece by piece. The call ended before she could speak. The silence afterward was louder than anything she'd ever heard. She knew, then, Jonah wasn't coming. Maybe he'd been stopped. Maybe he'd gotten scared. Or maybe, they'd already gotten to him. She had a choice. Run. Or finish what Eve started. Claire looked at her sleeping children, peaceful, innocent, and made the hardest decision of her life. She would burn it all down. Not the house. Not physically. But the empire that had fed on silence for far too long. The next morning, she left the kids with a trusted neighbor, a retired nurse who didn't ask questions, and took the flash drive to the one place she knew Dorian couldn't touch. The local public library. It wasn't much, old computers, slow internet. But it had one thing that mattered, open access. She uploaded everything. The video, the journal scans, the photograph, the metadata. She emailed it all to journalists, podcasters, whistleblower forums, watchdog groups. Even Reddit. And then she waited. She expected hours, days maybe. But it only took 2. The story exploded. Exposed. Billionaire tech mogul tied to missing whistleblower. Secret recording reveals cover-up, threats, and a decade of abuse. Hashtags lit up the internet. Eve Callahan's name trended for the first time in history. Claire didn't sleep that night, but for the first time, it wasn't fear that kept her up. It was adrenaline. It was hope. Meanwhile, Dorian's world was collapsing. Board members bailed. Investors fled. His face, once a brand of success, was now a meme for corruption. He tried denying it, then blaming hackers, then accusing Eve of being mentally unstable. But the voice in the audio, it was his. Clear, cold, unmistakable. Within 72 hours, he was removed as CEO. And then the real investigations began. The IRS reopened sealed records. 2 whistleblowers came forward. One, anonymously. The other, a former assistant, on national television. And all of it, traced back to that old, sagging house on the edge of town. The press tried to find Claire. They showed up at the neighborhood. Knocking, asking. She never came forward. Not for fame, not for money. Not even to say, "I told you so." She stayed quiet. Because the only thing she ever wanted was for the truth to matter. And now it finally did. But Dorian wasn't done. In a last, desperate act of revenge, he sent someone to scare her. A man in a suit. Polite, calm. He knocked once and said, "You made powerful enemies." Claire looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Then let them be afraid." And for the first time, he backed away. Because they weren't just dealing with a broke mom anymore. They were dealing with someone who had nothing to lose and the world watching. 6 weeks later, Claire sat on the same front porch where it all began. The paint still peeled, the roof still leaked, but the silence in her chest, the constant, pressing fear, was gone. And in its place, something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The world hadn't magically fixed itself. But something had shifted. The headlines were still loud, but they weren't about her anymore. They were about him. Dorian Holt had been indicted on multiple charges: fraud, obstruction, conspiracy. His empire had fallen like a glass tower, one pane at a time. And in the center of it all, stood the truth. Claire didn't testify publicly. She didn't want the cameras or the credit. But her evidence, the files, the recordings, the journal, was all handed over. And this time, no one could bury it. She thought about Eve often. About the quiet pain in her words, scribbled in the margins of that old journal. The way she kept writing even when she knew no one was listening. Claire understood that now. Because Eve wasn't trying to be heard. She was trying not to disappear. And through Claire, she didn't. One morning, a letter arrived. No name, no return address, just a handwritten note. "My mother's name was Eve. Thank you for giving her back to me. A daughter." Claire wept for someone she'd never met. And she wept for herself, too, for the version of her that once thought she was powerless. Because now she knew the truth. Sometimes the people with the least money have the most courage. And courage, when shared, is contagious. A few weeks later, a local charity offered to renovate the house. Volunteers poured in, donated wood, new paint, a real roof. One of the builders even fixed the porch swing, just because he saw it in the photo. Lily squealed the first time she swung on it. Ben chased her in circles, laughing like the world had never been dark. They were healing. Not because the world changed, but because their mother did. Claire didn't become rich. She didn't write a book. She didn't cash out. But she did find a job, helping victims of abuse navigate the legal system. She used her voice to help others find theirs. And in the quiet hours, she wrote. Not for the world, for herself, and for the women who never got the chance. In the end, it wasn't the house that was cursed. It was the silence. And the moment Claire broke that silence, the curse was lifted. Dorian Holt, the billionaire who thought he owned everything, had lost the only thing that ever truly mattered: control. And Claire, the broke mom who bought a $900 house. She walked away with something money couldn't buy. Freedom. We chase the big stories. The ones with mansions, private jets, billionaires and scandals. But sometimes, the most powerful stories start in silence. With a single mom, trying to protect her kids. With a woman no one believed. With a journal, buried in the walls of a broken house. Claire never set out to change the world. She just wanted to survive it. But her courage, her quiet, relentless courage, did something louder than 1,000 headlines ever could. It reminded us that power doesn't always look like money. Sometimes, it looks like a mother who refuses to be afraid. Sometimes, it looks like a woman holding the truth in her hands, knowing the cost, and choosing to speak anyway. And sometimes, it looks like a $900 house on the edge of nowhere, that turned out to be the one place the truth finally came home. So next time you hear someone call a place cursed, or a person crazy, or a story not worth hearing, remember Claire. Remember Eve. And remember that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the echo of injustice. Until someone dares to break it. This was their story. What will yours be? She bought a forgotten house with her last few dollars, and ended up shaking the empire of a billionaire. Sometimes, the most powerful people are the ones the world overlooks. If this story left you thinking, if it stirred something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV. Because here, we tell the stories that others bury. The stories that prove truth can rise from the ruins. We'll see you in the next one.